Hello everyone, welcome to my shop. This is going to be a quick video on how to rebuild a set of two-piece rotors. These specifically are the Z1 two-piece rotors for the Brembo package on 350Z. The process should be the same, at least on all Z1 two-piece rotors, whether you've got the Akebonos or the Brembos for either the 350Z or the 370Z. I'm only going to do the fronts in this, but fronts and rears are the same, just a different number of bolts. So I'm going to go ahead, take the front brakes apart. I'm only going to go over how to actually replace the rings in this. If you want to see me do a full brake job, comment below and I'll try and put one of those together as well. But for right now, I said I'm going to take some things apart and then I'll be back with you in just 1 second. I've taken the left front wheel off, removed the caliper, and removed the left front rotor. This is the one I'll start with. So as you can kind of see, I do have some kind of odd wear around here. I'm starting to see some larger cracks forming. These have seen quite a few track days, and if I'm being honest, I did mount these backwards for an entire season, so I was not helping the cooling aspect of them in at all. One important thing to note before you go any further, these are left-right specific. So you should get a set of rotors. There should be differences between the two. It's probably best to take one off at a time. But if you do get confused, one thing to note, you can kind of see the vanes are kind of directional here. The vanes should arc towards the back of the car, not towards the front of the car. Just one kind of important thing to keep in mind. I'm going to get this thing fixtured up, and I'll kind of go over what comes with the kit and all the tools you're going to need to actually do the changeover, and then we'll get to it. Before we start taking the old rotor apart, just kind of real quick, when you do order a replacement ring kit, it does come with 2 rotors, a left and a right, as well as all new hardware. It's 20 pieces of hardware for the front, 16 pieces for the rear. There's an extra pair of bolts for the front. To do this, you don't actually need a lot. You'll need some brake cleaner. You'll need some Loctite 271, which is the red high strength locker. You need a 10 millimeter socket, ratchet. You will need a small torque wrench. It's 96 inch-pounds. And then they do also recommend a center punch. I've got an auto punch, but you can use a hammer and regular punch if you would like as well, just as an extra security feature. So to make this easier to film, I made a little fixture to bolt this rotor to and put it in a vise. It'll also help me in the future because I've got multiple sets of rotors that I'll have to rebuild that are 2-piece. So you won't have this, but this is honestly something that the torque's low enough you'd actually be able to kind of either hold it down on the bench. You could C-clamp it to the edge of a bench. There's a bunch of different ways you could hold it. Just make sure you don't tear up either this face or the opposing face. On this side, on the front rotors, there's 10 bolts. On the rear rotors, there's 8 bolts. 10 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and use a small impactor to take all these out. You could use a regular wrench. I didn't mention it earlier, but small extension would be helpful, especially if you're using a traditional ratchet. As you do remove these, there are T-nuts on the backside that will fall out. You might want to keep a set of them around, so as you're backing them all out, just kind of have your hand underneath to catch them. I'm going to go ahead and take it apart, and then we'll go to the next step. So I've got all the bolts out. These are the bolt and nut. This is the T-nut that's on the backside. These were kind of stuck in there with a little bit of thread left engaged. I did use a small hammer and just gave them a quick tap, knocked them loose. Now that they're all loose, I can remove the ring. At this point, you are going to want to do a good job of cleaning all this up. Both sides, spray it down with some brake cleaner. I'm going to go ahead and do that, grab the other ring, set it over here, and we'll start going through kind of how to reassemble. Alright, so I've sprayed this down with brake cleaner, wiped it off, made sure everything's good and clean before I start to reassemble. So before I set the ring on here, I'm just going to kind of flip this over and show real quick. So these are the T-nuts that come with your kit. On the front side of the rotor, there are slots. These T-nuts go in, lock in, and the machining and the aluminum actually holds it. As you snug up the rotor, make sure that you're actually in the groove and not in some crooked shape, especially this is probably not the best time to use an impact or anything to take it in. These do only go to 96 inch-pounds and there is a torquing pattern. So I'm going to flip this over, clamp it back in the vise and get the ring on it, and then we'll go over the actual assembly process. All right, the ring's in place. I've got all my hardware ready. Directions recommend using Loctite 271. This is high strength red. There is a 272 as well that would theoretically work, but it's not really meant for fasteners this small. At this point, you're gonna put all the fasteners in place and snug them up. Do not tighten them yet. For this, you do want to put, as I said, a little bit of Loctite on all the fasteners. You don't need to slather these things. A couple of drops on a fastener this small is plenty. If you can cover 2 to 3 threads, even all the way around at the kind of leading edge, that is plenty of Loctite. Always make sure that you shake your Loctite up, especially if it's been sitting for any period of time. It is also a good idea to store your Loctite refrigerated. It just helps prolong the life of it. Ideally, also do not touch the tip of the applicator to the bolt if you can avoid it. So I'm going to put a couple of drops on here. So said that, in all honesty, is an excessive amount of Loctite for what you really need. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Install the first one. I said making sure that that T-nut actually fits into the groove on the back side before you go too tight with it. There we go. You do have a fair amount of time. You actually need to let these sit for 24 hours before you take this to the track. So you've got a little bit of working time with these. So as I said, I'm just going to go ahead, install the rest of these, just hand tight. We'll come back and go over the torquing procedure. All right, so I've got Loctite on all 10 fasteners, T-nuts on the back side. I've ensured that they're snugged up. Everything's hand tight at this point. Now we're going to go through and torque. There is a sequence. You basically want to pick a bolt. You go 1, 2, and then you start going clockwise and work your way around until you get around to the same one. Torque spec is 96 inch-pounds. You do not want to over torque these. You can, especially with the Loctite on there, you can stretch and break the fasteners. So I've got my torque wrench set to 96. I'm going to start at the top here. There's 96. Said, yeah. Start working my way around per the directions. So this is not high torque. You do not need to go at this with an impactor. You will break bolts. So I'm just going to go around and double check them all one more time, make sure that they are all set. And that's it. So all the bolts are tightened, everything's Loctite, everything's torqued to spec. They do have a recommendation, especially if you are tracking your Z, due to the heat and everything else. It's a good idea for an extra level of safety. You can go around and take a center punch. I have an auto punch. You could do a hammer and punch setup. And basically you just want to put a dimple basically in the edge of the threads, and it's just one more thing to help keep the fastener from backing out over time. Said I'm going to go ahead and do this to all 10 of my fasteners. Not required, but it is a good idea. It does, however, make these fasteners non-reusable because you will tear up the threads as you take it apart next time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll wrap things up. So that's it. I said it is a very easy job. It's harder to actually get the brake rotors off than it is to rebuild the brake rotors. I'm going to go ahead, spray down the disc with some brake cleaner, go ahead and get it mounted up. I've got new pads to put on, and I'm going to go do the other side, do a quick brake bleed, and brakes should be ready for the season. So thanks for tuning in. If you want to see more videos, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks.